The morning sun cast long shadows across New Eden Colony as 8-year-old Maya Chen chased her pet robot through the settlement's main plaza. Her laughter echoed off the crystalline buildings that humanity had constructed on this distant world, 300 light-years from Earth. The colony had been peaceful for decades, a shining example of human expansion into the galaxy. Maya's mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, watched from the medical facility's entrance, her heart swelling with pride at seeing her daughter so carefree. The colony housed nearly 50,000 humans, including over 8,000 children who had never known the cramped cities of Earth. This was their home, their future. Commander Valtos of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet observed the scene through his ship's long-range sensors with cold satisfaction. The massive dreadnought Dominion's Fury hung in space like a metallic predator, its hull bristling with weapons designed to crack planets. Around it, a fleet of 30 warships maintained formation, their crews eager for the coming demonstration. "Humans," Valtos muttered, his 4 arms manipulating the command interface with practiced ease. His species had ruled the galaxy for over 2 millennia, and these newcomers from a backwater system had grown too bold, too independent. They refused to acknowledge Zephyrian authority, establishing colonies without permission and ignoring tribute demands. The Empire had tried diplomatic solutions. Trade embargoes failed because humans simply found new partners among the younger species. Military blockades proved ineffective as human ships were surprisingly fast and well-armed. Political pressure meant nothing to a species that seemed to thrive on conflict and challenge. But children were different. Every species in the galaxy understood the sacred nature of protecting the young. Even the most warlike races had unspoken agreements about civilian populations. What Valtos planned would send a message that would echo across every human world. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the human defense stations are minimal. 3 orbital platforms with light weaponry. Their main fleet is conducting exercises in the outer system." "Perfect timing," Valtos replied, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Target the educational facilities and residential sectors. Make it clean and efficient. We want survivors to carry the message." On New Eden, the colony's defense coordinator, Captain James Rodriguez, stared at his displays in growing horror. The sensors had detected the massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace, but their approach vector made no sense. Instead of targeting the military installations or government centers, they were positioning for bombardment of civilian areas. "Sir," his communications officer called out, voice trembling, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through." Commander Valtos's image appeared on the main screen, his alien features cold and merciless. "Humans of New Eden Colony, you have defied the Zephyrian Empire for the last time. Your species refuses to acknowledge our authority, so we will provide education through demonstration. Your children will pay the price for your arrogance." Rodriguez felt ice in his veins. "You're talking about executing children. Innocent civilians." "Your weakness for your offspring is well documented," Valtos continued. "Perhaps witnessing their elimination will teach your species proper respect. This is the fate of all who challenge the Empire's will." Across the colony, emergency sirens began wailing. Parents grabbed their children, teachers herded students into underground shelters, and the handful of security forces scrambled to defensive positions they knew would be useless against such overwhelming firepower. Dr. Chen scooped up Maya, running toward the medical facility's emergency bunker. Around them, other families streamed through the streets in organized chaos. The colonists had drilled for this scenario, but no one had imagined facing such a massive fleet with hostile intent toward civilians. "Mommy, what's happening?" Maya asked, her young voice cutting through the noise of sirens and shouting. "Bad people are trying to hurt us, sweetheart," Sarah replied, forcing calm into her voice. "But we're going to hide until help comes." In the colony's command center, Rodriguez activated every communication array they possessed. The messages would take months to reach Earth through normal channels, but humanity had developed quantum entanglement networks between major colonies. The transmission would arrive instantly at the nearest relay station. "Emergency Priority Alpha," he broadcast into the quantum array. "New Eden colony under attack by massive Zephyrian fleet. They have specifically threatened to target children and civilians. Repeat, the Empire is planning to execute human children. We need immediate assistance." The response came back within minutes. Admiral Sarah Torres of the Human Defense Fleet answered personally, her weathered face grim on the screen. "James, we're 3 weeks out at maximum burn. Can you hold?" Rodriguez looked at his tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet had moved into bombardment position. His 3 defense platforms couldn't even dent their shields. "Negative, Admiral. They'll be in firing position within the hour. Our defenses are insufficient." Torres closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Rodriguez saw something that made him step back from the screen. The Admiral's expression had transformed from concern to a cold fury he had never witnessed before. "Record everything, Captain, every targeting solution, every communication, every detail. Make sure the universe knows exactly what they did here today." "Admiral, surely they won't actually—" "They will," Torres interrupted. "Because they think we're weak. They think our love for our children makes us vulnerable." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They have no idea what they've just awakened." Commander Valtos watched the final preparations with satisfaction. The targeting computers had locked on to every school, every playground, every residential sector where the young humans gathered. The bombardment would be surgical, precise, and utterly devastating to human morale. "Commence firing," he ordered. The first energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the New Eden Primary School with devastating accuracy. The building, where 300 children had taken shelter, simply vanished in a pillar of plasma fire. The shockwave shattered windows for miles around. Maya Chen felt the ground shake beneath her feet in the medical facility's bunker. The lights flickered as the building's structure groaned under the impact of the first strikes. Around her, other children began crying as their parents held them close. "Mommy, I'm scared," Maya whispered. Dr. Chen pulled her daughter closer, tears streaming down her face as she listened to the sounds of destruction above. Through the bunker's communication system, she could hear Captain Rodriguez providing updates to Earth. "Direct hit on primary school. Estimated 300 casualties, all children age 5 to 12. They're targeting the residential sectors now. Johnson Elementary is gone. The playground complex. Dear God, they're just vaporizing everything with children." The bombardment continued for 6 hours. When it finally ended, 23,000 humans were dead. 18,000 of them were children. Commander Valtos surveyed the smoking ruins of New Eden Colony with cold satisfaction. The message had been sent. Humanity would learn to respect Zephyrian authority, or they would watch their offspring die. "Broadcast on all human frequencies," he ordered. "Let them know this is the fate of defiance." But as the Zephyrian fleet departed, they left behind something they hadn't intended: survivors. Captain Rodriguez had managed to keep partial communications active throughout the attack. Every moment of the massacre had been recorded and transmitted across the quantum network. On Earth, Admiral Torres stood in the Strategic Command Center, watching the recordings with a room full of humanity's military leadership. The footage was devastating. Children running from plasma fire, schools exploding in brilliant flashes, families torn apart by weapons designed to crack battle cruisers. "How long until our fleets can respond?" asked General Harrison, his voice barely controlled. "The nearest battle group is 18 days out," Torres replied. "But that's not the question we should be asking." "What do you mean?" Torres turned to face the assembled officers. Her expression had changed during the viewing. Where once there had been professional military bearing, Now there was something primal and dangerous. The question is, how long until we can mobilize everything? Every ship, every weapon, every human who can hold a pulse rifle. Because what we just witnessed wasn't an attack on a colony. It was a declaration of war against our children. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of Earth's orbital traffic. Finally, General Harrison spoke. "Admiral, you're talking about total war, against an empire that spans half the galaxy." "Yes," Torres replied simply. "That's exactly what I'm talking about." She walked to the tactical display, calling up star charts that showed the known extent of Zephyrian space. Thousands of systems, millions of worlds, fleets beyond counting. "They made two critical mistakes today," she continued. "First, they assumed our love for our children makes us weak. Second, they let some of us live to see what they did." The Admiral's fingers danced across the holographic controls, highlighting human colonies, fleet positions, and allied species throughout the galaxy. "Send word to every human world, recall every ship, mobilize every reserve, activate every sleeper agent we have in alien space, contact our allies among the Andorian Republic and the Kepler Confederation. Tell them what the Empire did today." "Admiral," an aide interrupted, "the Zephyrians have numerical superiority of at least 50 to 1. This could mean the extinction of our species." Torres looked back at the frozen image on the main screen. Maya Chen's face, streaked with tears and dirt, looking up at her mother in the aftermath of the attack. The little girl had survived, but thousands like her had not. "You're right," the Admiral said quietly. "This could end everything for humanity. But what they did today, that cannot stand. They targeted our children, believing it would break our spirit." She turned back to the assembled officers, and every person in the room felt a chill at what they saw in her eyes. "Instead, they've given us something we've never had before in our expansion into space. They've given us a reason to show the galaxy what humans become when someone threatens our young. They wanted to see our full potential?" The Admiral's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "They're about to get their wish." The fire spreads. 3 weeks after the massacre at New Eden, the first human response arrived in Zephyrian space. It wasn't what Commander Valtos expected. The border outpost of Kepler 7 had been a quiet assignment for the last century. 50 Zephyrian ships maintained patrol schedules that hadn't changed in decades. The system contained nothing of strategic value except its position as an early warning station for human expansion. Commander Nexus lounged in his command chair, reviewing routine reports when his sensors officer called out in alarm. "Sir, detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Human ships dropping out of FTL." Nexus straightened, expecting to see a small fleet of human vessels attempting some foolish rescue mission. What materialized before him defied all tactical doctrine. 200 ships, everything from massive dreadnoughts to converted civilian vessels bristling with improvised weapons. But it wasn't the numbers that made Nexus's blood run cold. It was their formation. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and adaptation. Their fleets typically spread out, using superior speed and maneuverability to avoid concentrated firepower. This fleet moved as a single massive fist, ships packed so tightly that their shields overlapped. "They're making themselves an easier target," his tactical officer observed. "We can hit multiple ships with each shot." Nexus stared at the formation, understanding dawning on him like a creeping horror. The humans weren't trying to win this engagement. They were trying to send a message. "Open communication channels," he ordered. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to Admiral Janet Sullivan, commander of the human Third Fleet. But the woman looking back at him bore little resemblance to the diplomatic officer he'd met at peace negotiations 2 years earlier. Her eyes held something that made even a veteran Zephyrian warrior uncomfortable. Commander Nexus, she said simply, you will surrender this system immediately. Admiral Sullivan, you cannot seriously expect 50 ships to surrender to— I'm not asking 50 ships to surrender, she interrupted. I'm asking you to surrender, personally. Nexus felt his mandibles twitch in confusion. I don't understand. You were Commander Valtos's second in command before his promotion. You were present during the planning sessions for New Eden. My intelligence reports indicate you raised concerns about targeting civilian populations. The human admiral leaned forward, and Nexus saw something in her expression that chilled him to his core. So I'm giving you one chance to prove that some Zephyrians still have honor. Surrender yourself for trial and your crews live. Refuse, and we demonstrate what humanity does to child killers. Admiral, even if you destroy this entire outpost, you cannot seriously challenge the Empire. You're outnumbered 1,000 to 1 across the galaxy. Sullivan smiled, and Nexus wished she hadn't. It was not a pleasant expression. Commander, you still don't understand what your empire has done. You think this is about military strategy? About territory or resources? She gestured off-screen. Show him. The display split, revealing footage that made Nexus step back from his command station. Hundreds of human ships were visible, but these weren't military vessels. Converted cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining ships had been retrofitted with weapons, and every ship carried the same marking, a child's handprint in white paint. Every human who saw the footage from New Eden did this, Sullivan continued. Farmers, teachers, engineers, merchants. They abandoned their lives, took whatever ship they could find, and joined the war effort. Not because their government ordered it, because someone murdered our children. She leaned back in her command chair, and Nexus noticed the same white handprint painted on the wall behind her. This isn't a military campaign, Commander. This is a crusade, and every human in the galaxy is part of it now. Nexus looked at his tactical display. His 50 ships against 200 human vessels of unknown capability. But the numbers weren't what worried him. It was the look in the human admiral's eyes. If I surrender, you'll spare my crews? If you surrender, I'll demonstrate that humanity can still show mercy. If you don't— Sullivan's expression hardened. Then I'll demonstrate what we do to those who harm children. 10 minutes later, Commander Nexus transported aboard the human flagship as a prisoner. His crews were escorted to detention ships, unharmed but shaken. The Kepler-7 system had fallen without a shot being fired. But the real shock came when Admiral Sullivan broadcast the surrender across the entire galaxy. This message is for the Zephyrian Empire, she announced on every communication frequency in known space. You murdered 18,000 human children at New Eden. You called it a demonstration of power. Consider this our response. The camera panned across the human fleet, showing the converted civilian vessels, the improvised weapons, and most importantly, the white handprints on every ship. Every human who could hold a weapon has joined this war. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting because you crossed a line that should never be crossed. You targeted our children. She paused, looking directly into the camera. We're coming for you. All of us. The broadcast ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy within hours. On Androsia Prime, Chancellor Velos of the Andorian Republic called an emergency session of their governing council. The humans have gone insane, his military advisor reported. Intelligence indicates they've mobilized their entire civilian population. Merchant fleets, exploration vessels, even pleasure craft have been weaponized. Chancellor Velos studied the tactical reports with growing unease. The Andorians had maintained neutrality in galactic conflicts for centuries. But this situation was unprecedented. What's their total fleet strength now? Unknown, sir. Conservative estimates put it at over 50,000 ships, but the majority are improvised vessels with questionable combat effectiveness. Against the Zephyrian Empire's million-ship navy? Velos shook his head. They're committing species suicide. His communications officer interrupted. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. Put it through. The woman who appeared on screen looked haggard, as if she hadn't slept in weeks, but her voice was steady and determined. Chancellor Velos, I'm requesting passage through Andorian space for human vessels. Admiral Torres, surely you understand we cannot involve ourselves in this conflict. The Zephyrian Empire. Murdered children, Torres interrupted. They targeted schools, playgrounds. They killed 18,000 human children and broadcast it as a demonstration of power. The Chancellor felt his stomach tighten. The Andorians were an old species, one that had survived by avoiding conflicts with larger powers, but they also had strong cultural taboos against harming the young. Even so, we cannot risk war with the Empire. Torres leaned forward, and Velos saw something in her expression that reminded him why humans had spread across the galaxy so quickly despite their relatively recent arrival on the galactic stage. Chancellor, let me be clear about something. We're not asking you to fight. We're asking you not to interfere, because whether you help us or not, we're going through your space. The only question is whether we do it with your permission. Admiral, you cannot threaten the Andorian Republic. I'm not threatening anyone, Torres replied calmly. I'm stating a fact. Human children were murdered by an empire that expected us to submit out of grief and fear. Instead, every human who can pilot a ship has volunteered to show them what we do to child killers. We will go through your space or around it or over it. But we will reach Zephyrian territory. The transmission ended, leaving Chancellor Velos staring at a blank screen. His military advisor broke the silence. Sir, our intelligence reports indicate they're serious. Human ships are converging from every corner of their territory, and not just military vessels. We're detecting massive civilian evacuations from border worlds as the population mobilizes for war. Velos closed his eyes. The Andorians had survived for millennia by reading the currents of galactic politics. And right now, every instinct told him that something fundamental had changed. Open a channel to the Kepler Confederation and the Rigel Alliance, he ordered. It's time for an emergency session of the Neutral Worlds Council. Meanwhile, deep in Zephyrian space, Emperor Malthus received reports of the human response with growing disbelief. They're using civilian ships? He asked his military council. Yes, my lord, Admiral Krevok replied. Cargo haulers, passenger vessels, mining ships, all converted with improvised weapons. Our intelligence estimates they've increased their effective fleet size by over 3,000%. Effective is a strong word for such vessels, the Emperor mused. A cargo hauler with plasma cannons bolted to its hull is hardly a threat to our battle fleets. Individually, no, but the scale is unprecedented, and the humans appear to be using suicidal tactics. The Emperor's expression sharpened. Explain. At Kepler 7, they approached in a formation that made them easier targets. According to Commander Nexus before his capture, they seemed prepared to absorb massive casualties for minimal tactical gain. Fear makes species irrational, the Emperor observed. They'll exhaust themselves in meaningless attacks and sue for peace within months. Admiral Krevok hesitated. Sir, there's something else. Our intelligence assets among the neutral worlds report that several governments are reconsidering their positions. What do you mean? The footage from New Eden has been broadcast widely. Many species with strong protections for their young are disturbed by our tactics. Emperor Malthus stood from his throne, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. They fear to challenge us directly. The Andorians, the Confederation, the Alliance, they've hidden behind neutrality for centuries. Yes, sir. But they might allow human ships passage through their territory. Then we crush the humans decisively before they can build momentum, the Emperor decided. Deploy the 7th Fleet to intercept their main force. One decisive victory will end this foolishness. What Emperor Malthus didn't understand was that the humans had never intended to fight a conventional war. 3 days after the fall of Kepler-7, the first human raids struck deep in Zephyrian territory. They weren't military targets. Human ships appeared at Zephyrian colonies, mining installations, and trade outposts with the same message: evacuate all children and civilian personnel. Those who complied found their facilities untouched. Those who didn't watched their installations burned from orbit. But it was the method that sent shockwaves through the Empire. The human ships were crewed by volunteers, many with no military training. They approached Zephyrian positions in formations that guaranteed heavy casualties, and they all carried the same marking: a white handprint. Admiral Krevok studied the reports in his command chamber, trying to understand the human strategy. They were suffering massive losses for minimal tactical gain. By any rational measure, they were losing the war catastrophically. But the neutral worlds were beginning to take sides. First, the Kepler Confederation granted passage rights to human vessels. Then the Rigel Alliance opened their space borders. Within a week, even the traditionally isolationist vegan collective announced they would not interfere with human operations. The message was becoming clear across the galaxy. Someone had crossed a line that civilized species didn't cross, and the humans intended to exact a price for it. Emperor Malthus received the report of Vega Prime's decision with cold fury. The collective had been neutral for over 1,000 years. How? He demanded. How are the humans influencing these species? We have the largest fleet, the strongest economy, the most territory. Sir, his intelligence chief replied carefully, it's not what the humans are offering these species. It's what we did at New Eden. We eliminated a rebellious colony as an example. We murdered children, my lord, and the footage has been broadcast across the galaxy. Many species are reconsidering whether they want to share the galaxy with an empire that targets civilian populations. The Emperor fell silent, finally beginning to understand the scope of what had been unleashed. This wasn't a territorial war or a trade dispute. The humans had turned it into something far more dangerous, a moral crusade. And across the galaxy, species that had remained neutral for centuries were choosing sides based on a simple question: what kind of civilization deliberately killed children? The answer was becoming increasingly clear as human fleets, flying ships marked with white handprints, spread across the galaxy like a plague of righteous fury. When children's tears became stardust. 6 months after New Eden, the Zephyrian Empire faced something it had never encountered in 2 millennia of galactic dominance: total war against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Emperor Malthus stood before the strategic display in his war room, watching red icons representing human raids flicker across the galaxy like a spreading infection. The humans had abandoned conventional military doctrine entirely. Their fleets appeared everywhere and nowhere, striking at random targets before vanishing into neutral space. "Report," he commanded Admiral Krevok. 17 more raids in the past week, my lord. They hit mining operations at Helix Nebula, destroyed a supply depot at Rigel 9, and somehow penetrated our defenses at the Cygnus shipyard. Casualties? Minimal, sir. They continue to broadcast evacuation warnings before attacking, but our infrastructure losses are mounting. The Emperor's mandibles clicked in frustration. The human strategy made no sense by traditional military standards. They were suffering massive losses for minimal territorial gain, yet somehow they were winning. What about the neutral worlds? 67% now allow human passage through their space, Admiral Krevok reported reluctantly. The Vorthan hegemony declared open support yesterday. They're providing fuel and supplies to human vessels. The Vorthans have been allies for 3 centuries. We're allies, my lord. Their ambassador cited the footage from New Eden when withdrawing from our mutual defense pact. Emperor Malthus turned away from the display, his forearms clasped behind his back. In 6 months, the humans had accomplished something impossible. They had turned the galaxy against the Zephyrian Empire without winning a single major military engagement. "Perhaps it's time to consider negotiations," he said quietly. Admiral Krevok exchanged glances with the other military leaders. "Sir, the humans have refused all diplomatic contact. Their only response to our communications has been to broadcast footage of dead children and repeat the same message: justice for New Eden." "Then what do they want?" "I believe, my lord, that they want us to pay the price for what we did. All of us." Meanwhile, in the outer rim of human space, Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, watching her fleet prepare for the operation that would decide the war's outcome. Around her, 1,000 ships prepared for hyperspace jump. But these weren't the improvised civilian vessels that had characterized the early raids. These were purpose-built warships, constructed in the orbital shipyards that had been working continuously since New Eden. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "all fleets report ready. Operation Handprint is a go." Torres nodded, her eyes fixed on the star charts showing their target. Zephyros Prime, the Empire's capital world, home to 12 billion Zephyrians and the strongest defenses in known space. "Open a channel to all ships," she ordered. The faces of 100 human captains appeared on her screen. Men and women from every corner of human space, united by a single purpose. Behind each captain, Torres could see crew members preparing for what they all knew might be a one-way mission. "6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire murdered our children," she began. "They believed it would break our spirit, that our love for our young would make us weak. Today, we proved them wrong." She paused, looking at each face on her screen. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens human children. We don't seek conquest or territory, we seek justice." For Maya Chen, who still wakes up screaming from nightmares. For Dr. Sarah Chen, who lost her hospital and 300 young patients. For every parent who buried a child because an empire decided to make examples of the innocent. Torres raised her hand, showing the white handprint painted on her palm. "This symbol isn't just paint. It's a promise that no one who harms our children will escape justice. Today, we keep that promise." The transmission ended, and 1,000 ships jumped to hyperspace. They emerged in the Zephyros system to face the most heavily defended position in galactic history. 15,000 Imperial warships surrounded the capital world in overlapping defensive spheres. Planetary defense platforms bristled with weapons that could crack moons. The very space around Zephyros Prime was a maze of energy fields and automated defense systems. Admiral Krevok watched the human fleet materialize on his sensors with grim satisfaction. Finally, the humans had made a mistake. They had brought their main force into a direct confrontation where superior numbers would decide the outcome. "All ships, target the human fleet," he commanded. "Today we end this madness." But as the Imperial fleet moved to engage, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't spread out or attempt evasive maneuvers. Instead, they formed a tight formation and accelerated directly toward the planet's defenses. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are on a collision course with the planetary shield grid. They're not even targeting our ships." Krevok stared at his displays in confusion. The human fleet was moving like a single massive projectile, aimed directly at Zephyros Prime. It was suicide. Even if some ships survived the planetary defenses, they couldn't possibly. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. "Emergency communication to all stations," he shouted. "The humans aren't trying to conquer the planet. They're trying to demonstrate that they can reach it." The realization came too late. The human fleet struck the planetary defense grid like a hammer. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes as they encountered energy barriers and defensive fire. But for every ship destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. The humans weren't trying to preserve their forces. They were proving a point. Emperor Malthus watched from his palace as human ships burned in the sky above his world. The capital's population had gathered in the streets, watching the battle unfold overhead. For 2,000 years, no enemy had penetrated this deeply into imperial space. The very idea of foreign ships in the Zephyros system had been unthinkable. Yet there they were, dying in brilliant explosions that lit up the night sky. "My lord," his personal guard commander reported, "the humans have broken through the outer defense grid. 70% casualties, but they're continuing to advance. Impossible. No force can sustain such losses and maintain cohesion." "Sir, I don't think they care about casualties. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The transmission appeared on every screen in the palace. Admiral Torres's face, streaked with blood from a damaged bridge, looked out at them with unshakable determination. "Emperor Malthus," she said simply, "6 months ago, your forces murdered 18,000 human children. You called it a lesson in power. Today we provide our response." Behind her, the bridge of her flagship shook as Zephyrian defensive fire found its target. Sparks flew from damaged systems, but Torres never looked away from the camera. "Every human ship in this fleet is crewed by volunteers. Parents, teachers, farmers, engineers. People who had never held a weapon until they saw what your empire did to our children." The transmission flickered as another impact rocked the ship. "They came here knowing they would die. Not for conquest, not for revenge, but to prove something to the galaxy, to prove that there are still species willing to pay any price to protect the innocent." Torres looked directly at the camera, and Emperor Malthus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: fear. "Look up at your sky, Emperor. Count the lights of our dying ships. Each one represents a human who chose to die rather than let the murder of children go unanswered. Remember this moment. Remember what it costs when someone threatens human young." The transmission ended as the righteous fury exploded in a ball of plasma fire, taking Admiral Torres and her crew into the darkness between stars. But the human fleet continued its advance. Ship after ship died in the Imperial defenses, but their sacrifice created gaps that other vessels exploited. By dawn, 17 human ships had penetrated the innermost defensive sphere and were broadcasting images of Zephyros Prime from orbit. The message was unmistakable. If humans could reach the Empire's capital world, they could reach anywhere. The Zephyrian Empire's military supremacy was an illusion. Emperor Malthus received the final casualty reports in his private chambers. The human fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single vessel had escaped. By any military measure, it had been a devastating Imperial victory. But across the galaxy, the footage of human ships burning in the skies of Zephyros Prime played on every communication network. Species that had submitted to Zephyrian authority for millennia watched in wonder as a smaller race had proven the Empire could be reached, could be touched, could be made to bleed. Within days, the first rebellions began. The Centauri Consortium declared independence. The Outer Rim Alliance expelled imperial governors. 36 species announced they would no longer recognize Zephyrian authority. "How many rebels?" the Emperor asked his intelligence minister. 237 systems in open revolt, my lord. More declaring independence daily." "And the human response?" "They're supporting the rebellions with weapons, supplies, and tactical advisors. Every rebel fleet flies ships marked with white handprints." The Emperor closed his eyes. The humans had played a game he didn't understand. They had lost every major engagement, suffered catastrophic casualties, and gained no territory. Yet somehow, they had won. "What do they want?" he asked again. "Justice, my lord. They want the officers responsible for New Eden turned over for trial. They want reparations for the families of the children killed. And they want a guarantee that no Imperial force will ever again target civilian populations. And if we refuse? Then every species in the galaxy will know that the Zephyrian Empire murders children and faces no consequences. Our authority depends on other races believing we are powerful and just. The humans have proven we are neither. 3 months later, Emperor Malthus stood trial before a galactic tribunal. The charges were simple: genocide against human children. The evidence was the footage from New Eden, played before representatives of every major species in known space. Commander Valtos and the officers responsible for the massacre had been turned over to human authorities the week before. The alternative had been watching the Empire fragment into 1,000 rebel factions, each supported by humans who refused to let the murder of children go unpunished. Maya Chen, now 9 years old and still plagued by nightmares, watched the proceedings from the gallery with her mother. Around them sat representatives of species from across the galaxy, all present to witness the fall of an empire that had forgotten the most basic rule of civilization: you don't harm children. "Mommy," Maya whispered, "why did they hurt us?" Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her daughter close, watching as the emperor who had ordered the death of thousands of children was led away in restraints. "Because they thought being strong meant being cruel," she replied. "But they learned something that humans have always known." "What's that?" Sarah looked up at the gallery, where humans and aliens sat side by side, united by a shared understanding that some lines should never be crossed. That the strongest thing in the universe isn't the biggest gun or the largest fleet. It's someone willing to die to protect a child. The trial lasted 6 months. The sentences were swift and final. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 2 millennia, was dissolved. Its territories were redistributed among the species that had supported the rebellion. But the most lasting legacy was simpler. Never again would any species in the galaxy target children in warfare. The white handprint became a universal symbol of protection for the young. And across the stars, parents told their children the story of how humanity had shown the galaxy that some things are worth any sacrifice. The humans had lost 1 million ships and 5 million lives in their crusade. But they had won something more valuable: the knowledge that their children would grow up in a universe where innocence was protected. And in the end, that was worth any price.